Elon, nobody in the damn deep state has the guts to touch that thing. But you're not like them. I need you to burn it down, President Donald J. Trump, March 2025 Situation Room. West Wing. It wasn't a meeting, it was an operation, and it was about to change everything. March 2025, just weeks after Donald J. Trump returned to the White House in one of the most controversial but decisive electoral comebacks in American history. He was already moving fast. Executive orders were flying like missiles in this. One Operation D was about to hit its target inside the Situation Room under total lockdown, with phones confiscated and blinds drawn. Trump met with two men he trusted more than anyone in government, Elon Musk and his son-in-law, Jared Kushner. Trump didn't waste time. Use ads, bloated, lawless, and full of saboteurs. They've been suing the government, our government, for trying to hold them accountable. 26 of them bureaucrats. With God complexes, that's not civil service, that's mutiny. He slid a thick folder labeled USID final phase across the table. Elon raised an eyebrow. Mr. President, I'm not a government officer legally. I'm just Trump. Cut him off, eyes locked and perfect. That's exactly why it has to be you. You're not an officer, you're a senior advisor. You don't need to testify. You don't need confirmation. You advise, they execute. That's the law. You are the reset button. Jared nodded. All decisions go through Rubio and Morocco at state. You'll have full ratification. You won't be signing, you'll be guiding. Trump leaned back, then pointed at a small flash drive in a leather case. This here, it's the executive order signed this morning, effective immediately. USAID is done. Doge goes live. You're in charge of the restructuring. Wipe it, flip it, shrink it. Hell, if it were me, I'd shut the whole thing down. Elon said nothing for a long moment. Then slowly, he picked up the flash drive. A sly grin cracked across his face. Not amused, focused. He knew exactly what this was. Not a project, not a policy, a purge. What if I told you the biggest agency takedown in modern U.S. history wasn't done with tanks or congressional hearings, but with one flash drive, one order, and one man who wasn't even officially part of the government? Welcome to Operation Doge, Trump's secret weapon to gut the deep state from within. And the man he chose, not a senator, not a general, Elon Musk, because unlike the bureaucrats of Washington, he didn't need a paycheck or a desk or a fancy badge. He just needed a green light. Just because Elon is effective doesn't mean it's a legal. Federal judge, Fourth Circuit Appeals Court. That line, you'll hear it later in court, because as soon as Elon started pulling wires at USID, they panicked. 26 employees, none of them brave enough to file a lawsuit under their own name, filed under aliases. They claimed the shutdown violated the Constitution, that their emails were gone, their contracts erased, their headquarters closed. You want to know their actual demand? Open it back up, put the sign back up, reinstate everything. That's a real quote. And yes, they won the lower court for a moment until the truth came out, because Elon Musk wasn't operating alone. Everything he did was ratified by federal officials. Every move was legal. Every signature was there. And most importantly, he was not an officer, which means the lawsuits flimsy, the claims based on emotion, stress, fear of losing a cozy government job, and possible emotional distress over having to move their workspace. Check, I put on another 100 pounds. I'm up to 5,000 now. That's how the media tried to spin it. But this story isn't about hurt feelings. It's about real power being used legally and effectively to take down the unaccountable architecture of the deep state. And tonight you're about to hear exactly how it went down from the inside. The back room deals, the legal landmines, the showdown in court, and the moment the Fourth Circuit Court backed Trump and Elon and stayed the entire case. Because for once, the good guys actually fought back, and this time they didn't just win, they torched the rule book. USAID headquarters, Washington, D.C. The building carried that faint institutional smell, old dust, recycled coffee, and paperwork that hadn't moved in years. USAID wasn't the kind of place you went to change things. It was the kind of place you went to maintain, to stall, to stretch things out indefinitely. But today that cycle was coming to an end. Elon Musk stood in the center of the 12th floor conference room, flanked by Amy Gleason, newly appointed acting administrator of Doge. In front of them, a massive touchscreen display showing USAID's full organizational chart, along with a list of 26 names that would never appear on paper, just aliases. John Doe 1 through John Doe 26. Elon wasn't looking at the chart. He was staring directly at Amy. Clear it out, he said, slowly enunciating each word. Don't leave a trace of the old regime. Amy blinked. Her voice came hesitantly. Even the building, the signage? Especially the signage, Elon replied, stone-faced. I want dog to replace it, not temporarily, permanently. She glanced down at the sealed approval packet, full authorization for Marco Rubio and Pete Morocco at the State Department. Every decision was ratified, signed, and documented. Elon didn't need a sign, he didn't need a title. All he needed was to speak. And the employees, she asked. Elon looked up calm. As ever, they can resign on their own or we'll file it for them. On the screen, divisions within USAID were highlighted in red, targeted for dissolution, absorption, or deactivation. It looked less like a restructuring plan and more like a surgical chart. No blood had been spilled yet, but the scalpel was out of its sheath. Amy let out a quiet breath. There's going to be pushback, of course. There's, Elon said coolly, and it'll come anonymously, just like the lawsuit. She handed him a printed email from the John Doe's, those who didn't have the spine to sign their real names. You can't close our headquarters, open it back up, put the sign back up. Elon skimmed it, then smirked. They want us to rehang the sign. Amy nodded. They claim dissolving the agency violates the appointments clause. That dog wasn't properly constituted, that you have no authority. Elon Musk is not an officer. He repeated the line they were using against him. Exactly. I'm not a federal officer. I'm a senior advisor. And that's precisely why I can do this. He stepped closer to the display, pointing to the section marked personnel status. Put them on administrative leave, indefinitely, keep their access suspended until further notice. Don't delete anything not yet. Amy typed the preliminary directive into the system. And if they push back, Elon looked straight at her, unblinking. They already have. They said, we can't shut down the headquarters, but the building's not closing because of me. It's closing because they've made themselves obsolete. This is what happens when you institutionalize yourself into irrelevance. She paused. A new alert popped up on the screen. An email from John Doe. 19 Musk's derogatory remarks have created a hostile atmosphere for U.S. aid employees. We fear for our personal data, communications, and reputations. This action is emotionally damaging. Elon chuckled softly. First time today. Emotional damage, of course. He took the printout, tore it in half, and dropped it on the table. Tell them this emotional harm isn't irreparable harm. They're not in danger. They're in withdrawal from a government found comfort zone. And frankly, I don't fix emotional damage. I fix broken systems. Amy didn't respond. She finalized the draft. Command status lights on the screen began shifting to yellow, preparing for administrative freeze. Elon, she said quietly, are we certain the law's on our side? Rubio and Morocco signed off. He replied, Use it, ratified every step. I didn't authorize anything. They did. I advised. They executed. If someone sues, it's not me, it's them. And they know that they've already put their names on it. Amy nodded. What about the courts? Elon turned toward the window where the Capitol loomed in the soft haze of a gray D.C. afternoon. They might try to block it, he said. They've done it before. A district judge could throw down an injunction. But once it gets to the Fourth Circuit, it'll be clear we're not breaking the law. We're using it better than they ever did. He pulled out his phone, opened a draft memo addressed to dog personnel. At the top, a single line glowed across the screen. We're not reforming the system, we're vacuuming it. The door clicked shut behind him, and the storm began before anyone even knew it was coming. Private office, Georgetown, D.C. The door clicked shut like the closing of a vault. Not a soul outside knew this room existed. And that was precisely the point. Nestled deep inside a townhouse lined with ivy and liberal donor plaques, Norm Eisen's private war room buzzed with tension. The air was thick, not with cigar smoke or adrenaline, but with something more potent in Washington, the fear of losing control. On the table sat a stack of folders. On the folders, a name scratched out in Sharpie, and beneath it, two handwritten words, Elon Musk. Eisen stood at the head of the table, tie loosened, sleeves rolled up like a man preparing to operate not on a body, but on an institution. Around him sat 5 legal aides, identities blurred even in real time, aliases, encrypted tablets, burner phones. This wasn't a law firm. It was a legal strike cell dressed up in DC professionalism. Gentleman, Eisen began, voice flat but steely weir. Past the point of polite opposition, he tapped the folder in front of him. This isn't just about USAID anymore. If we don't stop this now, it's not just one agency getting axed. It's a blueprint. Use it today. FBI. Tomorrow. A young aide looked up from his screen. They're already moving. Staff have been frozen, access revoked. We got word they're replacing the building signage next week. Eisen's jaw tightened. He's not even an officer, another aide said, scrolling through the executive summary. He's calling the shots. But legally, he's just an advisor. Exactly, Eisen snapped. That's the loophole. He's a ghost in the machine. No title, no responsibility, just power. He turned to the whiteboard behind him. where someone had scrolled a simple phrase "dog means disruption of government entities." Eisen grabbed a marker and circled that this is how fascism looks in a business suit. They didn't put him in charge, they unleashed him, and now he's going agency by agency cutting. Heads like he's at a budgetary guillotine. One of the aides raise a hand. What about the plaintiffs? Are they ready? Eisen exhaled, slowly. Ready. They're scared stiff. Half of them won't even show their faces. We got a file under pseudonyms. He picked up a sheet. John Doe 12, another John Doe 19. They're terrified Musk will leak their emails, expose their locations, ruin their careers. They think he's watching them from orbit with a satellite and a grudge. He paused, then smirked bitterly. They might not be wrong. A voice chimed in through the encrypted video call. Grainy anonymous. I can't put my name on this, Norm, not with him involved. He has reached. Eisen looked directly at the screen, his voice going from lecturer to lawyer in an instant. Then we file, as John does. All of you, the law doesn't require bravery. Just standing. The screen flickered. Another voice, different, but equally obscured. We need something stronger than just fear and job loss. What's our case? Eisen stepped back, tapped the folder again. The appointments clause, the separation of powers, abuse of authority by an unofficial agent, and if that's not enough, we layer on the emotional harm, the hostile workplace, the reputational damage. He raised a brow, tone dipping into sarcasm, because apparently telling the truth about USAID is now destabilizing. He opened a browser window, projecting several headlines onto the wall. USAID wiped overnight. Is Musk behind the curtain? Bureaucrats fired in secret. Shakeup. Legal experts alarm. Sources say emotional harm from derogatory language. This, Eisen gestured. Wide as our artillery. One of the aides frowned. Sir, these are all opinion pieces, tweets, blog posts. Eyes and shrugged. The only evidence cited were social media posts and news reports. He said it plainly, almost proudly. They can't even sue under their own names. He leaned forward. But that doesn't mean we can't weaponize their silence. Musk wants to gut the administrative state in shadows. We're going to drag him into the light, kicking and screaming. He looked around the table. No one moved. You're not here to write history, he continued. You're here to stop a racer. They're not reforming the government. They're vacuuming it. A long pause followed. Then an aide spoke, voice low. What happens if we lose? Eisen turned to look him dead in the eye. Then we all become John Does. Silence again, and somewhere across town the new dog signage was already on order, stainless steel drilled and bolted, meant to last. But here in Georgetown, Norm Eisen had declared war, not with tanks, not with legislation, with fear, anonymity, and a stack of editorials masquerading as evidence. The battle lines were drawn. The courtrooms would be the trenches, and in the end, one thing was certain: someone was going to get exposed. Federal District Court, Green Belt, Maryland. Courtroom 2B smelled faintly of pine scent, disinfectant, and nervous ambition. A quiet tension blanketed the chamber, the kind that creeps in when the outcome isn't just a matter of law, but of power, real power, the kind that reshapes how things work in Washington, or whether they work at all. At the plaintiff's table stood Norm Eisen, sleeve sharp, tie perfect, eyes locked onto the bench, like a man born to argue. Before robes, this wasn't just another case for Eisen, it was his personal crusade, a last stand for the old guard wrapped in legal ease. Behind him, a smattering of aides and plaintiffs sat with faces unreadable, or in some cases literally hidden. Most had filed under pseudonyms. John Doe 12, John Doe 19. Some didn't even show, but their presence or lack thereof was strategic cowardice, was being repackaged as caution. At the defense table, a seasoned attorney representing Elon Musk sat alone, flipping through tabs in a well-worn binder. Musk wasn't in the courtroom. He didn't need to be, and in a way that fact alone irritated Eisen more than anything else. Judge Theodore Chung entered with a quiet nod, adjusting his glasses as he took his seat behind the bench. Polite, predictable, potentially persuadable. Mr. Eisen, the judge said, you may proceed. Norm didn't waste a second. Your Honor, he began, voice precise, cutting polish to DC perfection. We are here today to stop a fundamental breach of the constitutional order. My client's dedicated civil servants have been unceremoniously stripped of their contracts, their offices shuttered, their emails deleted, and their access revoked, all at the direction of a man who holds no official authority whatsoever. He paused, letting the words breathe. Elon Musk is not a Senate-confirmed officer. He holds no title defined under the Appointments Clause, and yet he's operating day-to-day as the de facto head of a federal agency. The judge scribbled something in his notepad. Eisen went on. This is not about policy disagreements. It is about legality, structure, the bedrock of separation of powers. If Mr. Musk can do this without oversight, without confirmation, without consequence. Then what stops the next advisor from dismantling another agency next week or the FBI next month? A soft murmur rose from the gallery. The defense counsel stood to object, but Judge Chuang waved him down. Continue, Eisen gestured toward the thick folder in front of him. We ask this court to issue immediate injunctive relief, reinstate all affected employees, restore their contracts, reestablish full access to government systems, return the headquarters to operational status, in short, reinstate everything. He snapped the folder shut. And as an additional matter of enforcement, we request that David Lewin, the individual allegedly serving as Musk's appointment inside Doge, be prohibited from any further administrative action. He must be removed from operational command. He cannot be in charge there. It was the full ask, brazen total, and loaded with implications. The defense stood quietly, no impassioned speeches, no indignation. Just a calm, calculated response, Your Honor. The attorney said Mr. Musk is not acting as an officer. He has not signed any binding orders. All decisions in question were ratified by appropriate federal officials, Marco Rubio and Pete Morocco at the Department of State. The plaintiffs have not presented concrete evidence refuting those ratifications. This is policy implementation, not constitutional violation. He tapped the table once. More importantly, the plaintiffs have failed to demonstrate irreparable harm. No data was leaked, no physical danger incurred, only speculative fear and workplace dissatisfaction. The judge leaned back, expression unreadable. Eisen shot forward. Once more, with respect, Your Honor, this court cannot ignore the hostile environment these government employees have been subjected to, the derogatory comments, the intimidation, the complete disregard for federal process. If this stands, then no part of the administrative state is safe. There was a long silence, then a quiet shuffle as Judge Chuang reached for the decision already typed on his monitor. I've reviewed the briefs, the oral arguments, and the supplemental materials, he said slowly, and I find that the plaintiffs have raised substantial constitutional questions. There is reasonable evidence to suggest the defendant's actions have exceeded the scope of advisory authority. Eisen's jaw barely tightened, but inside a fire lit. Accordingly, the judge continued, this court grants the motion for preliminary injunction. The following shall be ordered effective immediately: reinstatement of all contractor positions, restoration of system access, reversal of administrative leave, and reactivation of the USAID headquarters in Washington, D.C. He looked up. Furthermore, Mr. David Lewin is prohibited from executing any functions as administrator of Doge, pending further review. Eisen didn't smile. That would have been amateurish. Instead, he gave a subtle nod, closed his folder, and whispered, Phase 1. The court adjourned, and far across the PTOAC, Elon Musk was already reading the ruling from his phone, smirking not in defeat, but in calculation, because to him this wasn't the end, it was just the judge confirming the war had finally begun. Strategy room, Doge headquarters, Washington, D.C. The walls were lined with matte black acoustic panels, low lighting, and screens that never slept. No logos, no flags, just silence, data, and the quiet hum of a war room designed for people who never asked for permission. Elon Musk sat at the head of the long table, fingers steepled, the ruling from the district court still glowing on the central screen. The words hung like a challenge in digital ink: reinstate everything, make them contractors again, give them their emails back. To his right, Amy Gleason, eyes sharp behind blue light glasses, was scrolling through an internal thread. DOJ contact staff reaction, early press leaks. On the opposite side, a cluster of attorneys from Trump's executive legal team sat ready. They knew the playbook. They had helped write it. Nobody spoke. First, Elon broke the silence. So Judge Chuang wants to roll back the clock. No one replied. He wants to rewind the entire agency to the moment before we touched it. Headquarters staff emails like none of this ever happened. Still nothing. Elon leaned forward. Let me be absolutely clear, that's not happening. Amy looked up. Fourth Circuit. Elon nodded. Immediately, a lead attorney, thin and pale with the kind of face made for sealed courtrooms, slid a folder across the table. We've prepared the motion. We're filing for a stay of the preliminary injunction. The appeal will be heard in the Fourth Circuit. Based on the record, we believe we have a clean path. Elon opened the folder. Inside, the arguments, the signatures, the timeline of authorizations. Rubio and Morocco signed everything the lawyer said. Every action challenged by the plaintiffs: contract terminations, administrative leave reductions. Enforce was either approved or ratified by USAID officials. Not Musk, not Doge. He paused, then added, USAID officials either took and ratified these contract actions. Elon nodded slowly, and they admitted that in court they did. The judge even acknowledged it in his opinion. Amy tapped into the timeline screen behind Elon. It displayed each document: ratification memos, signatures, internal approvals. She highlighted one in red. Here's the key: the plaintiffs presented no direct evidence refuting this. They just objected on principle, the lawyer continued. And the plaintiff's core argument that Musk is acting as a government officer, it falls apart on its own weight. Another attorney interjected, flipping open a legal pad. Musk acted as a senior advisor, not an officer. He wasn't appointed under the Constitution. He holds no statutory position. He simply advised on policy implementation. Final decisions came from Senate-confirmed officials. He looked up. In short, he's the brain, not the badge. Elon smirked at that. They're suing the ghost in the system, Amy added, and using that ghost story to get a federal judge to force us into a bureaucratic Groundhog Day. Elon stood. Walking over to the screen, he stared at the judge's words again: reinstate everything, and let out a short, dark laugh. They want us to pretend this thing never happened, like the deep state gets a mulligan. The room stayed silent. He turned back, voice lower. Now, surgical, file the motion. Use the ruling against them. Quote it word for word. Show the court. They've already admitted we didn't break the law. Amy nodded. And if we want to stay, the whole thing freezes. Elon looked at the screen one last time. No, he said. If we want to stay, the clock starts ticking the other direction. He left the room without another word, the door closing behind him like a verdict. The motion will be filed within the hour. The Fourth Circuit would answer soon enough. And if they ruled like Musk expected, it wouldn't just be a stay, it would be a signal to every agency, every plaintiff, and every John Doe still clinging to their email access. The cuts were back, and this time they were staying. Fourth Circuit Court of Appeals, Baltimore, Maryland. They filed the appeal less than 24 hours after the district court's ruling dropped. No press releases, no grandstanding, just a surgical legal motion, clean, fast, and packed with receipts. By the time it hit the Fourth Circuit's docket, the message was clear. Dog wasn't backing down now. Elon Musk was in Baltimore, not for optics, not for ego, but because he understood this hearing was more than a legal procedure. It was a message to the press, to every last John Doe still emailing and all. Caps from behind a VPN. The Fourth Circuit courtroom wasn't built for theatrics. No marble pillars, no cable news, but just wood, steel, and the kind of solemn architecture that reminded you the Constitution still carried weight here. If you could make it speak your language. Elon was seated at the defense table, calm, unreadable eyes fixed ahead. He didn't tap his fingers, didn't scroll his phone. He waited patiently, like a man whose belief in the rule of law wasn't emotional, it was strategic. Across from him, Norm Eisen stood, flanked by aides and folders, tightening his tie, as if to squeeze out the panic beneath. He had won round one. But even he knew this court played a different game, and now the game was live at the center of it all. Judge Albert Diaz, a seasoned jurist with the posture of a man who had heard too many ideological arguments and wasn't impressed by any of them. His bench demeanor was sharp, skeptical, and notoriously allergic to political theater. Mr. Eisen, the judge said without looking up, you may proceed. Eisen stepped forward with studied gravity. Your Honor, what we are witnessing is the unauthorized dismantling of a federal agency by a private citizen. Mr. Musk, without confirmation, without legal standing, has acted in a capacity indistinguishable from that of an executive officer. He has exercised power, pure and simple, and that power has infringed upon the prerogatives of Congress. He placed a folder on the table. He has effectively dismantled USAID, redirected its functions through Doge, and done so without being subject to the appointment clause that, Your Honor, is a violation of the separation of powers. Judge Diaz looked up finally. So just to clarify, you're arguing he has power? Yes, Your Honor, Eisen replied. Quickly, the judge leaned back. Interesting, because 2 paragraphs ago in your own brief you wrote, Mr. Musk holds no actual or effective authority under law. Eisen hesitated. Diaz continued, voice sharpening. You just said he has no power, but this is a separation of powers claim. So which is it, Mr. Eisen? Is he too powerful to be ignored or too unofficial to be held accountable? There was a pause in the room long enough to notice the HVAC humming. Eisen swallowed. It is precisely that ambiguity that makes this dangerous, Your Honor. Musk operates in a legal gray zone. He directs policy, he implements restructuring, and yet he cannot be scrutinized under the same standards as a federal officer. Elon finally stood. With respect, he said, voice even measured, but unmistakably, Elon, gray zones are not illegal. Innovation is not unconstitutional, and neither is being effective. He stepped Toward the bench, I never held a federal office, never signed a binding order. Every action they complain about, every personnel shift, every closure, every redirection was ratified by USAID, approved by actual officers, documented by the book. Diaz leaned in. And what exactly is your role, Mr. Musk? I'm a senior advisor, Elon said. Plainly, I advise, I design strategy, I offer solutions, I don't execute policy officers. Do he turn to Eisen? What you're afraid of isn't me holding power, you're afraid of me using influence better than your people used authority. That's not unconstitutional. That's just embarrassing. A soft gasp came from the gallery. Even one of Eisen's aides, Twitch Judge Diaz, turned back to Eisen. Mr. Musk makes a point. If everything he did was ultimately signed off by officials with actual authority, how do you propose holding him accountable for actions he legally didn't take? Eisen tightened his grip on the lectern. Because intent matters, because Musk orchestrated the entire collapse of U.S. aid behind the scenes while appearing to merely consult. That is coordination without consent, power without accountability. Musk countered almost casually. Unconventional doesn't mean unconstitutional. Diaz didn't react. He turned his attention to the written record in your filings. You claimed that Mr. Musk's actions infringed on congressional intent, but you failed to name either USAID or the executive branch as co-defendants. Instead, you targeted an advisor. Eisen tried to redirect your honor. We also brought forth evidence of harm, personal, reputational, and operational to the plaintiffs. Diaz's voice cut clean. I read it. One plaintiff cited emotional distress due to derogatory comments. Another feared the loss of email access. None of that qualifies as irreparable harm under established precedent. He paused, then said pointedly, just because Mr. Musk is effective doesn't mean it's illegal. No one spoke from the side bench. A government attorney from the Trump legal office stood. Your honor, the record shows Mr. Musk never exercised statutory authority. He occupied no position created by law. He simply advised within the limits of executive discretion. If the plaintiffs want to challenge official conduct, they should name the officials, but they haven't. Diaz nodded, unimpressed, but not unconvinced. He must be occupying a position established by law, and he doesn't. A long pause, then Diaz stood slowly, deliberately, his robes falling into place like a curtain marking the end of Act 1. But this wasn't theater, this was precedent in motion. He adjusted his glasses, scanning the courtroom, as if memorizing every face. When he spoke again, his voice was quiet, but final, like a door closing behind history. This court has reviewed the claims presented, and while the plaintiffs have made passionate arguments, he said, glancing momentarily at Norm Eisen, passion is not a substitute for standing emotion is not evidence, and speculative harm is not irreparable harm. He turned slightly toward the defense table, where Elon stood with hands clasped behind his back. The record shows that Mr. Musk is not an officer under the Constitution. He occupies no statutory position. He exercises no final decision-making authority. The administrative actions in question were ratified by officials with proper appointment. Specifically, personnel at USAID, including Marco Rubio and Pete Morocco. He looked back at the bench, voice tightening. He must be occupying a position established by law. He doesn't. He gave that a beat to land, then continued. The plaintiffs have also failed to properly name the relevant agencies as defendants. A claim that hinges on executive overreach cannot be sustained when the executive branch itself has not been properly served. If you aim to sue the government, he said pointedly, you must name the government. There was a flicker of tension in Eisen's jaw, but he didn't interrupt. Diaz turned the page of his written opinion and closed the folder. The court hereby grants the motion to stay the preliminary injunction issued by the district court. All prior mandates to reinstate contracts, restore access, or return administrative status are lifted effective immediately. The appellants, acting within legal authority, may proceed. And with that, he stepped away from the bench. No drama, no flourish, just a clean severance of illusion. The old guard had filed their suit with the confidence of habit, believing that institutional memory carried legal weight, but the Fourth Circuit had just reminded them it doesn't. As the courtroom stirred and murmurs began to rise, Elon didn't linger. He turned toward the exit, pausing only once as a young reporter whispered to her colleague, "Wait, that's it, he won?" Elon glanced over with the faintest trace of amusement. Unconventional doesn't mean unconstitutional, he repeated under his breath. Then he walked out, the doors swinging open ahead of him like they'd been waiting the whole time. Outside, the headlines were already forming. Inside, one truth settled in quietly like a warning. They sued a man with no title and lost to a strategy. With no fingerprints, dog was no longer just alive. It was now court-certified post-trial press room. Baltimore, the podium was. Flanked by two rented ficus plants and a curtain so wrinkled it looked like the press team had given up halfway through ironing it. A makeshift backdrop read, Coalition for Federal Accountability. A name freshly invented, hastily laminated, standing under the spotlight were two attorneys. One of them clutched a folder labeled Client Confidential, though everyone in the room already knew what it contained. A legal Hail Mary. Good afternoon. The lead attorney began, straightening his tie with all the confidence of a man who just lost a major appeal. We are here today on behalf of public servants who have been emotionally devastated by the actions taken against them. A reporter from CNN raised a hand. Will any of the John Does be speaking directly? No, the lawyer replied. Out of fear for their safety, privacy, and mental well-being, they have chosen to remain anonymous. He flipped a page dramatically, as if conjuring moral weight from printer ink. One of our clients has reported severe stress-induced insomnia, chronic anxiety, and he glanced down. A compulsion to stress eat. There was a pause. According to the affidavit, he continued, he's gained over 100 pounds since Mr. Musk's restructuring of USA. A muffled chuckle broke out from the back, likely MSNBC, judging by the expression. The lawyer pushed forward. This is not just about jobs, it's about dignity. These individuals have had their workplace turned into a hostile environment. They fear retaliation, surveillance, digital eraser. Another reporter spoke up. Any material evidence of damaged data, loss, leaked emails. The attorney bristled. Their fear is valid, and while the damage may not be physical, it is profound. This is emotional injury, Your Honors. Not visible, but very real. That line made it on as CNN's Chiron. Within 15 minutes, emotional injury at federal agency. Former staffers speak out. Meanwhile, halfway across town, Elon Musk was watching from a boardroom in Doge HQ, phone in hand, scrolling through coverage with the detached amusement of a man who had seen this script before. He opened Twitter, paused, then typed, stress eating 5,000 pounds sounds like a staffing issue. Retweets 53,000 in the first hour. He followed it up a minute later. Just to be clear, no contracts were voided illegally, no data was breached, no one was threatened. This isn't trauma, it's bureaucracy experiencing accountability. That tweet went nuclear. The New York Times called it callous. The Daily Wire called it surgical. The John Does they call their lawyer again? But the ruling from the Fourth Circuit still stood. No injunction, no reinstatement, no sanctuary for emotional collateral, as one conservative commentator said bluntly that night on cable. This wasn't a mental health crisis. This was a contract dispute dressed up in a therapy session. The system had been poked, and for the first time it flinched. By the time the Fourth Circuit ruling had circulated through judicial channels, it was already being cited by lower courts in 3 districts. In a tiny courtroom in Omaha, a junior federal judge looked up from the printed opinion and muttered, "Damn, this originated out of Maryland." His clerk nodded. Fourth Circuit, tight language, direct precedent. They state everything. Another judge in Colorado passed along a highlighted quote to his peers. Just because Elon is effective doesn't mean it's illegal. It spread like administrative wildfire. What had started as a bold experiment in D.C. was now a nationwide doctrinal shift, a judicial green light to reassert executive authority against bureaucratic inertia. On television, conservative media caught wind first. That evening on Liberty Lens with Mark Callahan, the host held up a printed copy of the ruling like it was scripture. Folks, let's be honest, this wasn't just a legal win. This was the moment Washington realized Trump 2.0 wasn't going to nibble around the edges. The Fourth Circuit is saying Trump has the power, Elon has the power, and the deep state, they've got stress weight. His guest, a former federal procurement officer, laughed into the mic. Other districts will say, oh, Fourth Circuit just ruled, better shred those contracts before dog gets here. And somewhere in Texas, a federal attorney assigned to a similar challenge against another MAGA-linked restructuring paused mid-brief, leaned back, and said flatly, we're going to lose. Back in D.C., Elon Musk watched it all unfold with arms crossed and silence steady. He didn't need to speak. The courts were doing it for him. Dog had not only survived judicial scrutiny, it had set a new legal standard. And now, the very system that once insulated career bureaucrats was being used perfectly legally to erase them. Trump and Musk won this round, not through violence, not through the media, but through the law, and not law twisted in back rooms, but law used the right way in the right place. At The right time Doge was never a conspiracy. It was a legitimate administrative strategy. Elon wasn't a saboteur. He was the only one standing far enough outside the system to see how deeply it had rotted from within. And when the Fourth Circuit declared, just because Elon is effective doesn't mean it's illegal. America gained a new president. Competence is no longer a reason to be stopped. The left called it reckless restructuring. MAGA called it necessary correction. The lesson in a system addicted. 2. Stagnation. Any real action feels like a threat, but when that action is legal, transparent, and justified, resistance is just noise. The future of America under Trump isn't about going backward, it's about cutting clean through the decay, so the country can move forward unchained from faceless John Does and their manufactured fear. No more hiding behind bureaucracy, no more weaponizing fragility. This is reform with teeth.